Society attacks early when the individual is helpless. B.F. Skinner. Hi, I'm John Rose. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. How many times have you heard me say that phrase, that quote by B.F. Skinner? Well, if you've watched all of my videos, close to 700 of them, you know I've used that phrase probably 100 to 150 times at least. And I'm sure a lot of y'all know how I would finish that opening statement. Isn't it interesting how we're programmed to live to eat? Now that usually doesn't set in until around adolescence or so, but maybe even earlier nowadays. I reflect back as a youth when I was just a kid. I didn't live to eat. In fact, when I was outside playing, you couldn't get me to come in and eat lunch or dinner. No, Mom, I want to stay outside and play. I live to play. But as Tolstoy points out in that great essay, The First Step, once we reach a certain age, that's pretty much all we think about, isn't it? And those of us, the trim tabs of society that are on the hero's journey, that's what we're up against. How do you deal with all these people who live to eat? It's not easy. Part of the problem is, as soon as they hear a few words, they don't want to hear any more, do they? And that's because most people, or virtually everyone, is not in a position to evaluate what they're doing and what they need to do unless they've taken a long, extended, properly conducted solid food vacation on juices, because they don't know what they're missing. As soon as you even mention what they shouldn't eat, they're going to say, oh, I can never do that. And when I come out here on the hero's journey trying to find people's lives to transform, I change things up every now and then just to kind of see where people are at and to be reminded that most people live to eat. Trust me, I know. As soon as you say the wrong thing to some people, they're going to just tune out too quickly. It happened to me twice today. Second time with two people. As soon as I said raw, they go, oh no, I can never do that. And of course I told them that they're not in a position to evaluate it. They don't know what they're missing. No one's going to think it's a fair trade. And just talking health to a lot of people is not good enough either. I was reminded this morning as I was coming out here thinking about this subject, how when I went to hear Charlotte Gerson speak in the early 1990s, probably 92 or so, and she was explaining that she had just come from another location and they had a really poor turnout. Practically no one showed up. And she asked the woman who organized it, saying, well, didn't you tell people about me? Didn't you put a flyer out and stuff? They go, yeah, here it is right here. And she goes, well, no wonder, this is your mistake. You talked about prevention. People aren't interested in prevention. Let's face it, folks, most of us, when it comes to food, are like drug addicts. We pretty much have to hit rock bottom, most of us, in order to make some changes. And again, that's why I love the solid food vacation on juices, because it's only something on a temporary basis. So when you're struggling trying to get people to eat a healthier diet, it's the wrong approach. Remember, there are 3 ways to correct 5 main mistakes, 2 of which not enough of us are willing to do to get everyone's attention. Most people are afraid to death of a solid food vacation on water. And when you tell them what those 5 mistakes are, they're going to go, no, I don't want to give those up. I can't imagine life living. It wouldn't be worth it. And why? Because they don't know what they're missing. So we have to present something to them on a temporary basis just so they can see what they're missing. The last gentleman I just talked to, Robert, didn't go into diet. I just talked about the solid food vacation. And he was all excited about it. And I feel really good that he's ready to make that kind of change. First woman I talked to this morning was quite interesting. The only thing I didn't like about it, it didn't last long enough. I wanted to really talk to this woman so long. And it was so funny. The second time I saw her, I passed her one time, and I go up and I do my stretches. And then I come back around and I pass her again. So I said, well, this is a good chance to talk to this woman. And I had a feeling that she was a retired librarian. I just had that feeling. And I said, well, that's what I want to say to her. Are you a retired librarian? But the first thing I thought is, oh, don't use the word retired. Don't want to imply she's in retirement age. So let's just say she's a librarian. No, don't want to say that, just say a teacher. So that's how I approached her. I said, are you a teacher? I knew she was retired. She goes, no, I'm a retired teacher, librarian. I should have said, are you a retired librarian? That would have really blew her away. It was with the biophotons. I told you about that, Vicki, toward the very end of this. Again, we didn't get to talk near long enough. And since she was a librarian, I was really excited to share a lot of the things I've learned, because I knew she could understand it. When I told her about the serpent and Victor Hugo, her ears perked up. I knew she had to be a fan of Victor Hugo. And I knew she would have been a fan of a lot of other people I could have shared stories with if I just had a chance to talk to her a little bit longer. And interestingly, they had just, within a couple years, started watching these Netflix movies, like Forks Over Knives and things like that. So she was introduced to a plant-based diet, and she kind of thought that's where I was coming from initially. But then I said, no, there's another level. It can be taken better. I said, we're making 5 main mistakes. And those guys promoting that diet are still making at least 2 mistakes. And she goes, oh, you're talking about paleo? I go, no. Well, actually, I went through the 5 mistakes. I go, chemicals, machines, processed foods, agricultural, we're eating the wrong food. And then that's when I went to the cooking. And then that's when she threw, oh, paleo. I go, no, that's the 2nd mistake. And I told her about the video, the paleo and the vegan diet. Paleo people have corrected 3 mistakes. They're still making the first 2. Most vegans, if they're not eating too much, if they're not eating processed foods, are also corrected 2 mistakes. But there still are 3 mistakes. They're still eating they're still making the first mistake, eating the dead food, and they're eating plants they're not biologically adapted to eat. Now, of course, Vicki had seen these movies. She said, well, wait a minute. The Aztecs, the Mayans, Amrith, quinoa, these are good. These people live long, healthy. But when you don't eat the cooked food, you live longer and you're even more healthier. You didn't know that, did you? Yes, you can be better than others by making better bad choices. But why settle? Most people do because they don't know what they're missing. So, how many times have you heard me say, society attacks early? How many times have you heard me say, most of our problems begin in childhood? How many times have you heard me say that virtually every 7-year-old child on this planet has already been taught everything they need to know to make sure that the hell we live in now is going to continue? The war, the crime, the violence, the heart disease, the cancer, the diabetes, and on and on and on and on and on. If you haven't heard me say that very much, then you haven't watched enough of my old videos. So go back and watch some of my old videos. You don't have to wait for a new video to watch a video unless you have already watched all of my videos. So if you haven't heard me say those things very often, and I don't put out a new video that day, please take a look at the videos I've uploaded in the last couple years. I've had my YouTube channel since 2007, but I only did a few videos in the beginning and didn't really start making videos again until a couple years ago. And I've been doing close to 1 a day. Some of my best videos were done a year or 2 ago. And do I repeat myself? Of course I do, for that simple reason. We're programmed to live to eat. We have to understand on the hero's journey, this is one of the biggest obstacles we have. Remember, 5 stages to the hero's journey. Do you have the ears to hear? You're going to accept the mission, test an idea as time has come? Once you do that, are you going to continue onward, gather more data and allies, get a better understanding of the obstacles, and above all, share the message. Share the message. But the obstacles are important to understand if you're going to share the message. Now, you may want to already give up on all your friends and family if you've tried going at them with what to eat, because that's not going to work. Got to get them to test an idea as time has come. They don't know what they're missing. You're not going to get through to anybody based on where they're at now. They've got to understand the value of taking back control over things that are controlling us. Tolstoy's first step deals with gluttony. As Bishop Carlton Pearson said, the word for fasting means literally to cover the mouth, because sin came into this world through our mouths, through eating. And I know the average person can't wrap their brain around that. They don't see why cooking food would be bad. You haven't given much thought if you don't see the problem with cooking. Because if you weren't cooking, how many of y'all would be eating the animals? How many of y'all would be eating plants we're not biologically adapted to eat? And if we were at that stage, we sure in the hell wouldn't be processing our foods, stripping away all the good stuff, and using chemicals. Got to understand the value of that first mistake, or the value in correcting that first mistake. We have to understand all those ramifications that come from making the first mistake. Realizing that the average person can't wrap their brains around that concept. They got to do something on a temporary basis so they can see what they're missing. I'm sure you guys know a lot of people out there that have problems, and they'll go away if they take a solid food vacation. Don't even tell them what they have to do afterwards. Let them get a chance to see what they're missing. Just drink nothing but juices and watch those problems go away. Then go back to eating what you thought was food, and guess what your body's going to say at you? That ain't food. You fool, what's wrong with you? You built up a tolerance to this, didn't you? Again, society attacked early. Before we had the ability for critical thinking, we were already indoctrinated into a belief system and way of life that's going to program us to live to eat. Once we get to a certain stage, as Tolstoy says, once we get into adolescence, early adulthood, it's all we think about: food, 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 food. And what happens? What do people say when you say you got to eat raw food? Oh, I can never do that. Well, how do you know? Addictions, denial, that's what we're up against, my friends. All that programming, where everything centers around food. We have no self-control. And again, that's what Tolstoy's first step was all about. You got to gain back control. You got to take a solid food vacation on water or juices so we can unwind that cable, those habits we've created, and then reset our feedback system so that we can then trust our own experience. As Aristotle would say, believe only your own experience. There is no fact like a fact learned from your own life. The problem now is we build a tolerance to our mistakes, and when we stop making those mistakes, we can have cleansing reactions, and we might be damaged to a point where we're not getting everything we need, but we don't understand our feedback. But when you take a solid food vacation, you flush out the serpent that we have inside of our intestines. You bump up that coherent sunlight energy that's missing in the nucleus of our cells that makes us feel one with everyone and everything. And when we reset that feedback system, most importantly, then we'll finally be in a position to evaluate what we're doing and what we need to do. Because as it is, the average person is not going to think it's a fair trade. It doesn't even make sense. And that's because they don't know there's another level of existence on every level. Physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, every level will go up when we flush out all that crap and bump up the most important nutrient we're missing. The coherent sunlight energy that's going to change our mentality. And that's the key right there, folks. As long as we have the wrong mentality collectively, things are never going to change. That's the reality of the planet we live on. You can individually bump up your biophotons, get rid of what I call hypoheliosis A. That's an abnormally low biophoton level on an individual basis. But that hypoheliosis B on a collective level, that's what's going to keep us where we are. And that's why we all play a role when it comes to solving the problems we face on this planet. We can stress all day long about all the downstream garbage that's going on and try to clean that up, make it better. And there's a lot we can do that can actually help us reach the tipping point. But if we don't reach the tipping point, if we don't go upstream and get reconnected, bump up those biophotons, flush out the serpent, reset our feedback system so we can finally realize whether food is food or not, until that happens, we're going to still struggle. I don't see anything changing if we don't reach the tipping point. I really don't. Because it's too hard for the average person to get them to do anything. But there's enough of us out there that are in a position that we need to do this. And then if enough of us do that, we'll get everyone else's attention, and it's going to be a no-brainer. I guarantee you, I've thought about this enough to know that if 1 out of 10 people you know are doing this, you're going to jump on board. It's going to happen. I can guarantee you. Think about that. How many people do you work with at work? Or if you work retail, how many people do you see a day? Imagine if you see 100 people come in, 1,000 people come in. And what if you know a lot of them? And you go, wow, look at Judy, look at Mary, look at Bill, look at Mike. They're different people. I want a piece of that. That's what the tipping point is all about. That's the big 100th monkey that we search for or shoot for so that we can transform the planet. I often wonder, are we clever enough to overcome this negative ripple effect where we're now addicted and in denial? Live to eat instead of eat to live. Remember what Socrates said? Good men eat to live, whereas bad men live to eat. And that's why this is a bad planet. Everyone's going around living to eat, not realizing that they might do pretty good, only having 5 and a fraction of their senses. But some people out there are doing very poorly. And they're the ones in charge. And in order to defeat that aspect of us, we have to realize the role we play. All of us have to be better so that the worst of us can be better. And if all of us are better, the worst of us can't get the worst of us. And that's what's happening now. So, for those on the hero's journey, be aware of the obstacles. Can't be a prophet in your own home. I look back at all the people I've known, all my friends and family, and how many people have done it. It's sad. Sad. I get much better results coming out here talking to strangers. And I often reflect many times, what would have happened if everybody I talked to would have done something about it? They would have changed and they would have told everybody they know. We would have hit the tipping point a long time ago. Sometimes I can cop an attitude with some of you guys. I know what you're up against, believe me. I know you're afraid. I know changing is scary for a lot of people. But what's so sad is the people who need change the most are the ones who fear it the most. We fear the unknown. We cling to what's familiar. And I agree, we got to plant our garden no matter where we are, but when our garden is in hell, we got to realize we ultimately got to get out of that hell. And there's only one way to do that. We've got to change our whole collective mentality. And that begins by each and every one of us changing our individual mentality. And it doesn't require any intellect to do that. It just requires knowledge of how to live and apply that knowledge. Because that's our problem. We don't have knowledge to live, and that's why we don't eat to live. Instead, we live to eat. You know, I really can sympathize with my YouTube followers out there trying to get this message out. I know what you're up against. I know how hard it is to help your family and friends. And I know what it's like to be all excited and want to share this information, and then people just burst your bubble. Makes you want to give up, doesn't it? And that's usually what happens to most people. Or they figure out a way to soft sell the message a little bit so they can reach a larger audience thinking, well, if I can just get them to quit eating the animals, that's going to be better, right? It will be. But don't do it at the stake of slamming the raw food. And that's what a lot of people do. Yep. There are good days and bad days on the hero's journey, aren't there? Most of my days are great, absolutely great. Usually every day I at least meet 3 new people, get a chance to tell them about this message, tell them about my YouTube channel, tell them to make sure, read the comment sections. Make sure you tell your friends that are suffering that there's a solution for this. And of course, the biggest problem we have is we're not the experts, right? How could we know anything? Well, that's when you tell them what Aristotle would say. Believe only your own experience. There is no fact like a fact learned from your own life. You got to take a solid food vacation to truly understand what this is all about. Until you take a solid food vacation, you're going to really struggle wrapping your brain around all of this because of that reptilian brain. Remember, there's a battle between our brains. That thinking part of our brain, our neocortex, is pretty much the servant to the reptilian brain, where we can become addicted to anything that's pleasurable. So are we smart enough to overcome the negative ripple effect, where we pass our mistakes on down to our children? We indoctrinate and program our children to live to eat. We got to stop doing that. And the day we can stop doing that to our children is the day the next generation won't be making our mistake. And that's the time when this whole planet is in for a treat.